say it will be challenging. There's so much challenging. Like I say, to a person who's grown up with love in their life and a life of nonviolence and decision making. I mean, my youngest kid is 26. I mean, so, you know, that makes it both challenging and advantageous. Because I have love in my life, I carry that around me. I had 2 great parents. They were awesome. I grew up like everybody did in my day without any money. But my dad came home every night at 5 o'clock from his factory that he worked at his entire life. And he threw the baseball to me for half hour and chopped out and cooked him. My mom was always there. So I grew up with a lot of confidence, a lot of love, and I felt wanted. And I felt my dad, who grew up in some ghetto in Birmingham, England, with absolutely nothing in line to get in the Navy at 16 to go into World War II. And to me, had a very difficult existence, was an incredible guy. Never raised his voice to my mother, never struck her. I never done anything but tiring wisdom out of the guy the whole time I was ever home. And so I grew up with that example. So for me, I look at the others in jail and I'm thinking, these poor bastards, most of them never had a chance. You know, every last one of the substance abuser never had a father. Every native I ever met never had his father in his life. Most of them are totally unfortunate, chaotic childhoods and stuff like that. So I always feel very blessed that I'm me and I'm in here looking at the people who are here because they didn't have a chance. At least I chose to be here. You know, and I still have my mind intact. I hope I can keep it intact. One of the things I'm worried about is that my mother died of Alzheimer's disease. And, you know, there's some humorous aspects to recalling that. Like when your mom asks what restaurant you're at 8 times in an hour. You want to throttle her. But instead I should have thought of just writing down the name on a piece of paper and putting it in front of her. That way whenever she thought about it. Things you learn about patience too and what have you. But she would never smoke pot. And no person who smokes pot after age 52 has ever gotten Alzheimer's disease. There's no known historical example of a single person who smokes marijuana that's ever gotten Alzheimer's disease. Well, it's because if you don't use it, you lose it. You'll lose your cannabinoid receptor. And when you, oh yeah, there's lots. By the way, anything I ever tell you is true, and you can verify. You don't even have to believe it. Just Google cancer therapy, marijuana.
I say don't trust them. Go find out for yourself.
It's staggering. And there's not just 1 or 2 studies. There's about 10 on Alzheimer's alone. And then another one came out last week. And I've been telling people my speeches for years because our magazine always had a lot of cutting-edge research. And a lot of great studies from the 70s and 80s were suppressed by the American government that showed all these things, especially cancer actually shrinking, THC shrinking cancer. People say, can't cure cancer. I said, no, it can. It can destroy, break down, and eradicate actual tumorous cells. That's why no one ever gets lung cancer, respiratory cancers, even though they do bong hits like I do, like bong hits all day long. And that's good for your lungs because your lungs expand, taking a whole bunch of THC at the same time they're taking oxygen. And very few people even understand that THC works opposite nicotine. Nicotine's a vasoconstrictor, and THC is a vasodilator, so it makes all your capillaries and arteries and veins larger, and therefore able to deliver oxygen and blood faster, quicker, and in greater quantity. And so when you do a big bong hit, not only you're opening your lungs up to a lot more oxygen in your lungs. See, normally you just exhale it, because you can only absorb oxygen at a certain fixed rate. But once you've got THC in your lung lining, it absorbs oxygen at a much faster rate. You've already got a lot more oxygen in there to absorb, and all your capillaries are open much wider. And then additionally, allowing it to take in all that oxygen, which in itself will attack tumor cells, then the THC coats the lining of your lungs and breaks down and destroys cancerous tumors on the surface of your skin. So that's why no one ever has lung cancer, even if they smoke marijuana like I have for 30 years, or 35 or 40 years. Never, there's no historical, no coroner's report showing a lung that was abused by marijuana. And you know what, if there was one, we'd see it. I mean, in Canada, we had 38,000 people die of tobacco last year alone. 38,000 died largely of lung cancer from tobacco, but not a single coroner, and a coroner will say that, died of asphyxiation of the lungs. The one who's choked off oxygen, they're not operating, they died of cancer. The same pathology over and over again. We see it thousands of times a year, 38,000 miles through. Not a single pathology that shows that marijuana smoke is in any way going to cause cancer or gives people cancer. That's pretty phenomenal. That's like magic. It's actually like magic, right? And to think that no one who smokes pot, remember 5 to 7 million Canadians smoke marijuana, as there's at least 500,000 Canadians that to this day have been smoking for 30 to 45 years. Not a single one of them has Alzheimer's, not even at any stage. That's just too incredible, right? Now, it doesn't reverse Alzheimer's, it stops its progression. Because what happens is the cannabinoid receptor in your brain withers away. And as you add cannabis to it, it stops the withering away. And it doesn't start to wither away until about age 52 to 55 at the earliest. So as long as you're smoking cannabis from age 51 onward, you should never see dementia or deterioration in your memory or any other symptoms related to Alzheimer's, because you're actually preventing its onset. And that's pretty fantastic, you know. And so you wonder, what kind of government will not only criminalize all the people that believe in marijuana, criminalize their leader that believes in marijuana, even though the Bible admonishes us several times, and over 200 references in the Bible, it actually is either specific about cannabis or general about cannabis, about it being a good thing. You know, nothing in the Ten Commandments admonishes us not to use alcohol or drugs. And there's very few real laws in the Bible that are actual commandments. And there's nothing about drugs, cannabis, plants in the Bible except positive things. There's always only positive things. Genesis 1:11 says, take all this grass, these herb-yielding plants that produce seeds, and make good use of it. And furthermore, God saw it was all good. God told us to use it, basically chow down, use this for meat, actually, is what he said. And so we were meant to take these plants, grow them, consume them, eat them, and not destroy them, because they're all good. So the idea that man would take it upon himself to determine that some plants were good and some were bad is actually laying God's word asunder. You're not supposed to do that. That's like absolutely forbidden in the Bible. You're not supposed to define it. You're supposed to celebrate my creation by doing what I'm telling you. Which early in the book, 1:11, and they'll read in the 11th verse, he's telling him, I saw it's all good. You're going to use this. By Genesis 1:31, he said, take this. This is what I'm going to do in 6 days, and you've got your marching instructions. There you go. Grow these things out. You make good use of them, because they're your only survival that's possible on this planet. And it's funny, because all the things we use as words for marijuana, grass, herb, the kind, all come from Genesis. They're all words in the Bible to reference plants and that have been adopted by our culture. And so our culture is in many ways Rastafarian, in other words, quite religiously inspired.
Should be faxing Harper those Genesis.
Well, you know, I would actually say, if you're writing to your conservative member of Parliament, quote the Bible generously and with good referencing too, because there's many, many, many examples
The
of the
Church
Bible.
of the Universe does a lot of this. They're very religious, Christian, and they believe in the tree of life. And
The Bible, what was the first prohibition was in the Bible, and we know whether that worked or not, right?
Well, here's the thing, though. It wasn't a prohibition against alcohol, because Jesus continually asked for alcohol over water. Water was not highly regarded because alcohol would not carry the parasites and bacteria and viruses that would be in water. Because in those days, they didn't know until thousands of years later that to sterilize the water, you need to boil it. That wasn't discovered until the 1840s. And so in those days, people would drink out of the river, but people would be pissing up river and shitting up river, and people would wonder why their stomachs always started getting bloated and parasites. So people were very unhealthy because of their water. That's why they eventually found that fermented beverage like beer and wine were seemingly much safer. Jesus asked for wine. His mother did actually. Mary asked for the Mediterranean over water. Jesus on numerous occasions also asked for it. The only time drunkenness, of all things, which was common in the biblical period, is even mentioned in the Bible, is once when St. Paul remarks on it in Ephesians about the drunken revelry he was condemning. But Jesus himself never speaks out against plants or alcohol, and neither does anyone in the Old Testament specifically. So there's really no admonition against marijuana for any particular use. But if Jesus did walk the Middle East, he certainly would have had to have warned him, because cotton clothing didn't exist till the 1720s. Cotton was used as batting and cannons, and it was used to make books, because short fibers you can make into books, but you can't make clothing out of short fibers unless you have something called the cotton gin, which was developed in 1720. So I would use canaf, flax, jute, and around where Jesus was walking, there was hashish everywhere, so it would have been processed into its fiber as well. Oh yeah, sure. Well, any questions about the movie? And
well, a lot of things in the movie, of course, are kind of different. We feel, that was, as I said, many years ago, and so, different ways we
Jodie's
react.
younger than she.
And I was also I was on Effexor for a number of years, and I just finished getting myself off of it on New Year's this year. Yeah,
and that was a 2-year whittling down too.
Yeah, it took 2 years to get off, and I was an antidepressant, and it made me. Well, I felt it was a fog. I'm much more grounded now. I'm much more serious. I'm living in the reality and feeling things more strongly.